Good morning, nerds. Welcome to another installment of Unity Gameplay Basics tutorials. Today's task is we are going to work on trying to do kind of the same thing we've been doing over the last couple tutorials, which is trying to get enemies moving between waypoints. This one is, I think, more fun than the previous one because we're going to work on this in 3D. And we're going to learn a little bit about how the internal NavMesh AI works. That's navigation mesh. And so we're going to be using that. Now, what I did, rather than walk through and take up a bunch of time in the tutorial, I kind of made, it honestly looks a little like a mini golf course, but I made myself a little layout here. This is basically just a plain, started off just so you can see some of my settings here. This is a plane that is just scaled by about 5 to make it a little bit bigger. We've got a smaller plane over here that is still 111, but I've got a 20-degree rotation on that. On the z-axis to give it a little bit of an angle, and I've set the position so that it kind of barely goes through the plane on the bottom. And it just kind of touches the lip of this other plane, which is a smaller plane. It's scaled a little bit wide. I've got 2Z, and is positioned, cloned and copied, and set next to this plane. And you're going to notice there is a gap here that's intentional because we're even going to talk about jumping today. We're going to do AI jump, which is not quite as cool as human jump or controller-driven jump, but it is still pretty neat. And then I've also placed 3 spheres just a little bit up off the ground here, and those are waypoints 0, 1, and 2. And so I've placed waypoint 0 is kind of over here in the little nook. Waypoints 1 is, that's waypoint 1, I'm sorry. Waypoint 1 is out there, and waypoint 2. I've also got 3 cubes, rather, that have just been stretched and skewed. If you would like to pause and copy mine, that is totally fine. But as long as you have something, just kind of some obstacles to keep the player from, or the enemy from moving around, or going just straight directional towards things, that's going to work out perfect. And then the last thing I did was I made a player capsule. And if you look at his z-axis, coming off of his z-axis, I just added an additional sphere inside of him, up and poking out just a little bit, just so that way I can see which direction he's facing. And I use the blue and green materials from last time to color everything. So the grounds are all green, the walls are all blue, and his visor is that same blue. So there's just kind of a recap of what I made prior to the start of this. Mostly just because I didn't want to do all of that layout work on camera, but there you go. If you want to try to, if you'd like to try to recreate it, you can at least go back through and look at my transforms up here in the corner to recreate the parts that you want to do. Okay, so basically the scenario is about the same as with the 2D version of this. When we were trying to move between waypoints. And basically my goal is that my automated enemy is going to run around this whole area, is going to go in and try to grab this sphere, is going to come back out, go across here, get to this one, and then navigate to here. And from that point, if I wanted to, I didn't create a starting sphere for his first waypoint, but I could have to make him go back to start again if that's what I wanted, and or create it as a spawn origin point if I was trying to do something like the auto spawner we learned in the 2D tutorial. I'm not going to create a spawner in this one. The technique is the exact same. So if you do this tutorial and then you follow it up with the previous tutorial, which covered how to make a spawner in 2D, all the code for the spawner and everything is like literally identical. So you wouldn't really need to change anything there. I think the only thing you'd have to change is we use tank script, and in this one we're going to use I think enemy script or something. I haven't really decided what I'm going to call that yet, but that's it. Like everything else would be identical. So pretty easy adjusting there. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be using the NavMesh system. And NavMesh, which is short for navigation mesh, is a system that's built into Unity to manage pathfinding in 3D. And it's designed on an idea that some surfaces I can walk on and some things are obstacles. And I basically need to locate points. And there are so many pathfinding methods available to you. One of my favorites in a 2D plane, especially if I'm working in grid-based systems, is what they call A star. But the nice thing about the Unity system is it's basically like a node. It's what we call a node-based system, and it works really pretty efficiently, and the code for it is pretty tight, which means that using it in your programs isn't likely to have too much performance cost. Now, if your game is entirely built around pathfinding and you've got hundreds of objects trying to use it at the same time, something like, for example, a real-time strategy game, I'm not sure if NavMesh is going to work well for that or not. I've never tried it on that kind of a scale before, but if you're trying to do something simpler or with less moving objects, like, for example, a first-person shooter typically doesn't have a ton of obstacles on the screen or a ton of mobs on the screen at the same time, you're probably going to be okay. So what we're going to look at is how to set this all up. So the very, very first thing we need to do is basically access that NavMesh component. And the way we do that in the current versions of Unity, I don't remember where the menu is on the older versions. It was slightly moved, but this should be it's the same process, it's just that the menu items are different, but is under the window menu. And we come down to AI and click on navigation. That's going to open up a new tab. It typically opens up with the inspector. And if not, you should put it there because that's a great space for it. And what we want to do here is, generally speaking, the basics, the defaults are pretty good, but it may open up in the Agents tab. I'm not sure which tab is normally the default. I was playing around with it earlier, so mine was defaulting into Object, and that's really where you want to be. So we're going to go ahead and click on Object, and what we need to do is tell the game which objects are basically part of my navigation mesh and which things are obstacles. So what I'm going to do is, for me it's easy to look at here because I've got all the planes are walkable, and my walls and all my cubes are not. But basically, I'm going to just, I can either click on things in the inspector. I'm holding down the control key right now to highlight everything. So you can either do it that way, or you can do the same thing in the inspector, just highlight each of the pieces. And what I'm going to do here is under navigation area in this menu here, I'm going to switch that to walkable. Again, that's on the object screen. So all of these things have been marked walkable. And it is totally okay. You don't have to do them all in one burst like that. So like if I'm like, oh, okay, what do I want to do with this one? What do I want to do with this one? That totally works. And I'm going to demonstrate that with the cubes. So my cubes are all representing walls. So they're obviously not walkable. So I'm going to click on each one and assign it to the not walkable in order, and it looks like they've still retained their settings from when I thought I had deleted that, but they are still retaining their settings from last time I was playing with this. But basically, I'm just going to click on this not walkable section and make sure that all of them are tagged not walkable. And the last thing I'm going to do here is under the bake window, I'm going to look at my jump distance, and I'm going to just kind of eyeball this. Actually, I'm not really eyeballing it because I've already tested this, but I want them to be able to jump across this, but I don't really want them to be able to jump across to anything else. So how wide is this? And it turns out if I set mine based on where everything's at to a jump distance of 3, not 33, just 3, this is going to actually work out okay, and they'll be able to, that distance is enough for them to get over this little jump, and we'll see how to identify that in a second. And so now if I click on bake, what I'm going to get here is I'm going to see all of this, so you can kind of see that the map has changed colors. I've got a little bit of an edge radius here, and that's because the mobs don't want to go into, like, if they walk too close to a wall, they'll start clipping into it. So this is basically preventing clipping. And you can adjust that by adjusting this agent radius here. But I'm not going to worry about that too much. And then I've got my navigation. You can see these jump paths. So if it hits one of these circles, it'll just jump across and hit the other one. So this is going to look, this is working pretty nice. Now, if I didn't set the jump right, I'm going to set it too small. If I would have set that to 2, you're going to notice that I'm not seeing those little jumping paths, and that's because I used too low of a number. My object is just not going to be able to make that jump, and so I would have had to either move it closer or set it to a bigger number. But I'm going to go ahead and use 3 here. Again, click bake again, and you're going to get that update. So you can make adjustments, hit bake, make some more adjustments, hit bake. The one thing you do need to do, though, is if any of your map geography changes, you do need to rebake. So for example, I'm going to duplicate this wall and just kind of make another lane here to travel in. And I don't know, let's move that over this way, I guess. No, I don't want to go that crazy. I'm just going to, yeah, we'll just do that. Okay, so I'm going to put this wall in, but you're going to notice that the wall is actually not showing up. You're not seeing this little edge border around it, and that's because it's not part of my mesh. What I would need to do, again, is go back to the Objects tab, click on that wall, make sure it's marked not walkable, and then go back to Bake, say Bake, and there we go. Now it's showing up correctly. It's got that little bit of a green edge to it. In case things haven't been marked navigation static, that's something else we need to do that may have been done before I started, is make sure that all of your objects are marked navigation static if they're not going to move. And that forces, or that makes it so the computer doesn't have to constantly recalculate things. Okay, so believe it or not, that was the hard part. My mesh is set up. I've basically taught it the AI, and if we look at this, we can actually see kind of how it's working. It's divided my area into these like faint gray lines. I'm sorry, it's probably not showing up very well on YouTube, but it's giving me these faint gray lines, greenish gray, I guess, that's dividing my mesh up into smaller polygons, and those represent the various zones that I can cross through. So that helps it do its math. It tries to figure that out. But now, basically, I'm ready to go. I can do a little tiny bit of code, and all of this is just going to work. So the very, very first thing I need to do is on my capsule, which is my player, or not my player, I guess. It's really representing kind of an enemy. But on my AI object, I'm going to tab back into my inspector. And the thing I need to add here that's not already there is the NavMesh agent. So I'm going to go nav. I'm going to start typing in nav. I'm going to pattern match to the NavMesh agent. That is a built-in function you should have, or a built-in component rather. And really the defaults are pretty good here. The only two that I might want to mess with are speed and angular speed. And I'm going to bump my speed up. 3.5 was a little slow when I was testing it earlier. So I'm going to bump this up to about 5. Angular speed is probably fine. Just like when we did ours and coded it manually, speed is how fast it's going to move towards its goal every frame, and angular speed is how much turning, how fast it can turn. The cool thing is it's going to handle all that stuff for me, including the turning. So the code for this is going to be a breeze compared to what we did last time. Okay, so we're gonna really, really simplify what we have to do. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to add component, and I'm going to set, let's see here, I'm going to call this enemy pathing script. Create and add. Of course, it's going to attach to the character just like it always does. And I'm going to double click on that to open it up in my code. Let's go. Come on. Let me try that one more time. I'm going to double click on it. There we go. It opened up in my other window. Just a second here. Let me drag this back over. Okay, so enemy pathing, it's going to open that up, and let's take a look and see what we need to do. So we are going to do some quick edits, and really this is there's not much here. The very, very first thing we need to do is just like last time, is we want to set up a series of waypoints. Now, if we wanted to, we could follow what I did in the second part of the last tutorial, which is map to a game controller instead, and we could use their waypoints. But for this, I'm just going to create them over again. So I'm going to do the exact same technique. I'm going to do public transform array of waypoints. And the other thing that we're going to need to do, now we don't need to worry about speed or rotation speed, which we did do last time, but we do still need a current waypoint. So we're going to do public int current waypoint equals 0. And then the last thing that we need to make that we haven't had to do before is a NavMesh agent. And for this, be careful about how you type this. I'm going to do NavMesh agent, capital N, capital M, capital A, and we're just going to call that nav. Now, here's the problem. You can see that it's redlining here, and that's because by default, Visual Studio doesn't know what the heck a NavMesh agent is. Now, typically it doesn't know what, for example, a transform is either, but we're using Unity Engine as one of our include files, and that has all that information in it. But it doesn't have any data about NavMesh agent. So what we need to do is add an additional using to our code in order to have access to that tool. Now, if we already know what tool we need, we can add it up here manually. So for example, I can do using unity.ai. Ooh, that isn't it. I thought that was it. Is it unityengine.ai? Okay, it's unityengine.ai. But here's the thing, and so I can just, there we go, and that's going to make this work. But obviously I'm not too good at remembering those. And a lot of times I know the tool that I want to use, but I don't know the specific using that it is. So my first attempt is always to right click on it, and we have this option here labeled quick actions and refactorings. If I click on that menu item, it's usually going to bring up a menu, and most of these things you don't ever want to do. But the first one, if the first one says using, it's usually pretty safe. And that's going to usually get you where you need to go as long as the thing you typed in was correct. So as long as you did NavMesh agent, capital N, capital M, capital A, you should be fine. And again, if I click this, it's going to add that extra bit of code and resolve the error. So there's my pro tip. That's usually how I do it, but that requires that you do know the thing that you're trying to access. So once we've got that down, we're going to do very, very similar to how we've done some of this stuff in the past. We are going to NavMesh agent, we're just going to say nav equals get component of our NavMesh agent. Whoops, that was not what I meant to type. NavMesh agent, and that'll allow us to access it. Under update, all we've got to do is tell the NavMesh agent where we want to go, and basically what our destination is. So we're going to look at, I'm going to construct code that looks very, very similar to what we did with the 2D tutorial at the end of it. And if you need more explanation on what some of this code does, definitely reference that other tutorial. I'm trying not to repeat all of it all over again for people who've been doing the previous ones. What we're going to do is we're going to say if current waypoint is less than waypoints.length. Again, that's so that way we can figure out, or that way we don't go out of bounds on that array. What we're going to do, instead of transform.position and using that move towards, we're just going to tell the NavMesh agent where we want to go. So we're going to say nav.setDestination. Whoops. And actually, we don't even need to do that here. You know what? I am changing my plan. Just delete all that. We don't need any of that. Actually, we're really just needing to do our collision. Sorry, I was rethinking this. In start, what we're going to do is we're going to say nav.setDestination. And we're going to set that to, whoops, you need parentheses for that. We're going to set that to waypoints bracket 0 because we want the first item dot position. That's going to get us to the first spot. And then what we're going to do is we're going to rely on collision. And I forgot to set up collision on our objects in Engine, so we'll have to go back and do that in a second. But we're going to use basically the same system that we used last time. We're going to go on trigger. And this time we want to use on trigger enter because we're not doing 2D. We're going to be using 3D objects, so we want on trigger enter. And on trigger enter, what we're going to do is if, and in this case, this is using collider other, so we're going to do it that way instead. Collider, whoops, actually we want other there. If other dot transform is equal to waypoints current waypoint dot transform, what we are going to do is basically the same thing that we did last time, which is we are going to go current waypoint plus plus, and we are going to go nav dot set destination of, let's see here, waypoints current waypoint, whoops, that needs to be square brackets, current waypoint dot position. And that's really about it. This is pretty basic. We can also change this around if we want to. One of the other cheats we can use is instead of current waypoint plus plus, just so we can immediately use it, we can actually just do the cheat for this is plus plus current waypoint. That's going to increment and then change our position. So it's kind of a cheaper, faster way to do this. The other thing that we need to do is we do need to check and make sure that we aren't at or past our maximum. So we are going to do a quick check here, and we're just going to say, hey, if the current waypoint is less than, I think this is going to work, yeah, is less than waypoints.length, then we're going to keep on looking for it. And that should do it. Hang on, I'm just trying to think about this in my head now. Current waypoint, if it's 18. Yeah, that should do it. I think so. We'll have to test. But I think this will work. And so basically we've done this in just a couple quick lines of code here. We do need to save this. I'm not 100% sure on this. We may need another if statement there, but that's okay. And we're going to come back here. We do need to do a couple quick edits. And the two quick edits that we need to make are on waypoint 0, 1, and 2. We do need to make sure that their capsule collider, or they have a built-in sphere collider, but we do need to set that is trigger. So we want to make sure that we add that is trigger. Otherwise, those trigger functions are not going to work. And then the last thing we need to do is on our capsule, we do already have a capsule collider that's built in for us, but we don't have a rigid body. And just like the 2D version, without the rigid body, this isn't going to work. So we're going to add the rigid body. We're going to uncheck use gravity because, again, we don't need it, especially on a NavMesh, that's detrimental. And we're going to go ahead and run. And other than a possible error when we get to the end of this, I think this should work. So we're going to go ahead and hit run here. As soon as it's done building, it should have, just like last time. I did this exact same thing last time. This time it wasn't intentional. We do need to fill in those waypoints. So we have, in this case, I have 3 waypoints. So I'm just going to put a 3 in here. Hit enter and load in those waypoints. Without the waypoints, it just doesn't know where to go. Okay, so we're going to put in my waypoints. We're going to hit play. Now it should be good. Okay, and now the nice thing is I'm going to keep track of it on the scene view, but if we watch him on the scene view, you can actually see he's spinning and he's turning and he's moving in the optimal route. Now, sometimes people like to expand out the amount of space around these, so that way the route is a little less optimal and it feels a little more natural, because he does tend to hug the walls. But aside from that, he's doing a pretty good job. He just found the first waypoint. He's moving over. You're going to notice that he's going to be pretty effective at traversing that ramp, which is great. He's going to jump across. He's going to hit that last waypoint, or not the last waypoint, but he's going to hit that one. And he's not allowed to jump down, so he's going to jump across. He's going to traverse that ramp again. And then he's going to traverse into that wall. He cuts it a little bit close, and then he's going to make it to that last waypoint. And I think it should stop there. But he is erroring. Unity is, or it is outside the bounds of the array. So we do need to do a couple quick checks here. I guess I can't use that + method. Really what I think we need to do here is I'm going to go back to, I'm going to put the current waypoint ++ right here, and then set the destination, and I'm going to get rid of, be careful not, don't keep it in there. I'm going to get rid of the + in here, so this one's now gone. I think that's going to fix it. I was trying to be clever, but apparently it didn't work out for me. So we're going to run this one real fast and just see if it works, because I think it's going to work now. Okay, so come on. Of course I turned it off. Okay, so we're running through. Come on, there we go. Okay, so he's running over to down the first line, spins around. He's gonna head to the second, or to the first waypoint. And he's got the first one. He's going to move up over here to get to the second one. He's going up that ramp, jumping across the gap, hitting that second waypoint, jumping across, traversing the ramp. And hopefully what we see is he just plain stops at that last one, and then we're good to go. Index is outside the bounds of the array. Let's see here, if current waypoint is less than waypoints.length, we can set destination equal to waypoints.position. That should have worked. Did I forget to save again? Nope, I did. Oh, because it's still checking. Well, no, it shouldn't be checking that again. But it does only do it once. On trigger enter at line 20. Oh, it did check this again. Okay, so it looks like it hit this transform again. And so we could do a little bit more error checking to make sure that that didn't happen. But it looks like he hit the trigger a second time. So because it's erroring out on line 20, so it's erroring out up here. It's not erroring out down here. So I'm not going to worry about this error too much. Honestly, it wouldn't crash the game, I don't think. But also, fixing it is going to require a little bit of extra work. We'd have to do another, up here, actually, we'd have to do it again. We'd have to say if current waypoint is less than waypoints.length, put all of that in there, and then check it again. And this will probably work. So I'm going to save this, and we're going to check that out. but I'm going to go ahead and close while it's running because I don't feel like we need to sit through the entire movement just to have that work. So hopefully adding another waypoints check at the very, very beginning is going to fix that. Anytime you're accessing arrays, you really should be making sure that you are checking valid values, and this is a good way to do it. But we're going to run this, and while it's running, I'm going to go ahead and do my closing, and then if I have to interrupt it, we'll go ahead and interrupt it. So to recap what we've done on this one, there he goes. To recap what we've done, today we learned how to set up a kind of a 3D board that is compatible with NavMesh. We learned how to access the NavMesh navigation control panel. We learned how to lay out a mesh. We learned about walkable versus non-walkable areas. We learned even how to set a jump across. We learned how to set collision points. And really, we learned how to use, how to add the NavMesh agent into your object so that we can control it. And then we basically replicated the code from the 2D experience using with some of those NavMesh components in order to make the mesh work. And now we're going to get to the very, very end here, and we'll be able to test this and just make sure that we're not still erroring out, because I don't like leaving errors in my code. That's working fantastic. We aren't seeing any more errors in there, so we're in a really good spot. So that's it for this unit, or for this tutorial. As always, if you found it helpful, please like and subscribe, because that's always a good thing. And in our next tutorial set, actually, this is the last one we're going to do on pathfinding for a little while. We're going to jump topics for the next one. We may come back and do some other pathfinding experiences later, but again, I'm not going to do the like the spawning and stuff that I did with the 2D one. But that code basically works. So if you want to do something 3D using that spawn technique, you could totally do it here. The one thing you would have to add is you would have to add an additional waypoint at the beginning to use as a spawn point. So that would be the only edit you'd have to make. You could also do the modulo trick if you did waypoint plus equals current waypoint plus 1 modulo the length, you would still be able to do a loop and have it go back to start or whatever. So that would still work. So anyways, if this helped you, like and subscribe. As always, in closing, I'm going to say keep on creating, and we'll see you next time for the next tutorial. Thanks a lot, and have a great day.